The snow fell in thick, wet flakes, clinging to the bare branches of the oak trees that lined Sycamore Street. It was a quiet street, in a quiet town, where wealth bought silence and power erased truth. On the manicured lawn of the largest house, a boy stood over a dog. The boy's name was Chad Sterling. He was 17, with the bored, cruel eyes of a man who had never been told no. The dog was a German shepherd named Max. His coat was a mix of sable and black, his ears alert, but his eyes were clouded, milky and blind. He had been a gift to a girl named Sarah from her father, a soldier who never came home. "Stupid animal," Chad sneered, his voice cutting through the muffled quiet of the snowfall. Sarah stood on the porch, her arms wrapped around herself. She was 16, small for her age, with the same quiet resilience her father had possessed. "Please, Chad, just leave him alone." Her voice was a whisper, easily swallowed by the winter air. Chad laughed. It was a cold, empty sound. He was the son of Richard Sterling, the man who owned the mills, the shipping company, and half the town council. He operated under a blanket of impunity woven from his father's money. He nudged Max with the toe of his expensive boot. The dog didn't flinch, only whined softly, turning his sightless eyes toward the sound of Sarah's voice. "He's useless," Chad said. "Just like you." He turned his attention from the dog to the girl. He took a step toward the porch. Another. His friends, 2 other boys from the football team, watched from the sidewalk, their phones held up, recording. They were silent witnesses, their inaction a form of applause. "My father said your mother is late on the mortgage again," Chad said, his voice dropping into a mock-sympathetic tone. "Maybe we can work something out." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Get off my property." The challenge, however quiet, was more than Chad Sterling was used to. His face hardened. He closed the distance in 2 quick strides, grabbing her by the arm, her jacket bunched in his fist. "What did you say to me?" A low growl rumbled from the lawn. Max, despite his blindness, sensed the shift. He knew the scent of fear coming from his girl. He knew the sharp, aggressive tone of the boy. He rose to his feet, unsteady but resolute. He took a step forward, then another, his body a low, tense line of warning. Chad glanced over his shoulder, an ugly smirk twisting his lips. "You think this thing can help you?" He released Sarah, shoving her backward against the porch railing. Then he turned to face the dog. Max barked, a deep, resonant sound that held no fear. It was a command, a final warning. Chad ignored it. He drew back his leg and kicked. The blow landed squarely in the dog's ribs. Max yelped, a sharp, piercing cry of pain, and stumbled sideways, his legs collapsing beneath him. He hit the snow-covered ground with a heavy thud. Sarah screamed. It was not a plea. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage and grief. Chad kicked the dog again, and again. The boys on the sidewalk laughed. The tiny red light on their phones glowed in the fading afternoon light. Down the street, a battered Ford pickup truck had pulled to the curb. The engine had died, a common occurrence. The driver, a man named John Creed, was about to get out and look under the hood when he heard the scream. Creed was not a large man, but he was built of dense, hard lines forged in places most people only saw in news reports. His face was a mask of controlled stillness, his eyes a pale, watchful gray. He was passing through, a ghost visiting a grave. The grave of Sarah's father, his friend, his teammate. He saw the boys with their phones. He saw the boy standing over the fallen dog. He saw the girl, small and broken on the porch. He did not run. He did not shout. He simply got out of his truck and started walking. His boots made no sound on the snow-covered asphalt. He moved with an economy of motion, a predator's glide that was both silent and purposeful. The cold air did not seem to touch him. The scene before him registered not as chaos, but as a tactical problem. Target 1, the primary aggressor. Targets 2 and 3, the witnesses, complicit. Victim, the girl. Asset, the dog. Status unknown. Chad Sterling was preparing to kick Max a final time when a voice, quiet but carrying the weight of a granite slab, stopped him. That's enough. Chad turned. He saw Creed standing there, a few feet away. He took in the worn jeans, the faded flannel jacket, the quiet exhaustion in the man's face. He saw no threat. "Mind your own business, old man." Chad spat. Creed's eyes flicked from Chad to the dog, then to Sarah. He saw the terror in her eyes, but beneath it, something else. A flicker of recognition. She knew who he was. He was the man from the photographs, the one her father called his brother. "I said," Creed repeated, his voice unchanged. "That's enough." He took a step forward. Chad, buoyed by the audience of his friends, puffed out his chest. "Or what? You'll call the cops? My father owns the cops." Creed didn't answer. He simply kept moving forward. It was the walk he had learned in the dark, in narrow hallways where every step could be the last. Deliberate. Final. The arrogance in Chad's face faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The two boys on the sidewalk lowered their phones. The humor of the situation had evaporated, leaving a cold, tense residue. Creed stopped directly in front of Chad. He did not raise his hands. He did not change his expression. He simply looked at the boy. The full weight of his attention, of everything he had seen and done, was focused into that single, unwavering gaze. Chad Sterling had lived his entire life in a world padded by his father's influence. He had never faced a consequence he couldn't buy his way out of, but the man in front of him was different. He was looking at something ancient and absolute. He took an involuntary step back. Creed's gaze did not follow him. It shifted to the dog, lying whimpering in the snow. He knelt down, his movements fluid and precise. He ran a practiced hand along Max's side, feeling for the extent of the damage. Broken ribs. Maybe internal bleeding. He looked up at Sarah. "Is there a vet nearby?" She could only nod, tears streaming down her face, freezing on her cheeks. Creed gently, expertly, scooped the large dog into his arms. Max cried out once, then settled, instinctively trusting the sure, steady hands that held him. Creed stood up, holding the 70-pound animal as if he weighed nothing. He looked back at Chad Sterling. "This isn't over," Chad threatened, his bravado returning now that there was distance between them. Creed's expression did not change. "No," he said, his voice a low promise. "It isn't." He walked past the boys, past their useless phones and their stunned silence, and carried Max to his truck. Sarah followed, a shadow of disbelief and desperate hope. The truck, as if sensing the urgency, started on the first try. The waiting room of the veterinary clinic was small and sterile, smelling of antiseptic and fear. Creed sat on a hard plastic chair, his posture perfect, his hands resting on his knees. He had not said a word since they arrived. Sarah paced. She twisted the hem of her sleeve, her mind a frantic loop of the sound of the kick, the sickening thud, Max's cry. The vet, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Evans, finally came out. "He's stable," she said, her voice gentle. "2 cracked ribs and severe bruising. He's tough. He'll be sore for a while, but he'll recover." Sarah sagged with relief, leaning against the wall for support. Creed just nodded, his eyes fixed on the closed door behind the doctor. The boy who did this, Dr. Evans said, her expression hardening. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate, cruel. You need to report this to the police. Creed looked at Sarah. He saw the hope drain from her face, replaced by a familiar, weary resignation. It won't matter, Sarah whispered. It was Chad Sterling. Dr. Evans' face fell. She knew the name. Everyone in town knew the name. It was a name that ended conversations, that closed doors, that bought silence. Creed stood up. He walked over to Sarah, stopping in front of her. He was not much taller than her, but his presence seemed to fill the small room. He looked directly into her eyes. He saw her father in them, the same courage, buried under layers of pain and fear. "He will not touch you again," Creed said. The words were not a comfort. They were a statement of fact, a promise forged in steel. "He will not touch your dog again." He paused, the silence stretching between them. "This ends," he said. "I promise you." Sarah looked at him, at this quiet stranger who had appeared out of the snow like a guardian spirit from her father's stories. For the first time in a very long time, she believed it. Later that night, Creed's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered it, his voice flat. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was smooth, confident, dripping with condescension. "Mr. Creed, this is Richard Sterling. I believe my son had a misunderstanding with your ward today." Creed remained silent. "I understand the dog was injured," Sterling continued, his tone suggesting it was a minor inconvenience, like a scuffed shoe. "I'm prepared to be generous. Let's say $20,000 for the vet bills and any emotional distress. A check can be delivered in the morning. In return, we'll consider the matter closed." Creed looked out the window of the small motel room he had rented. The snow was still falling. "It's not closed," he said. Sterling's sigh was audible, a sound of practiced exasperation. "Listen to me, friend. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I built this town. The police chief plays golf with me. The judge is my cousin. You are a ghost passing through. Do not make the mistake of thinking you can make a stand here." There was a beat of silence. "You think you're the first person to try and cause trouble for my family? They all learn. They all take the money in the end." Creed's voice, when he finally spoke, was colder than the winter air outside. "You're right," he said. "I'm not the first, but I am the last." He hung up the phone. The war had begun. The next morning, Creed and Sarah went to the police station. The building was old brick, exuding an air of tired indifference. The desk sergeant, a heavy man with a sour expression, barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. Creed laid out the facts, calmly, precisely. He described the assault on Sarah, the brutal kicking of the dog, the names of the witnesses. He presented the vet's report, which detailed Max's injuries. The sergeant listened with a bored expression. He took the report, glanced at it, and set it aside. "Chad Sterling," he said, the name a full explanation. "Rick Sterling's boy." He looked at Sarah. "You sure you want to do this? Kids fight. Things get out of hand. Filing a report like this, it can make things difficult for you at school." It was a dismissal wrapped in a threat. "We want to file the report," Creed said, his voice firm. The sergeant sighed, a long put-upon sound. He slowly, deliberately, filled out a form, his handwriting a lazy scrawl. He handed them a copy. "There, it's filed." Creed knew it would go straight from the sergeant's desk to the bottom of a drawer, and then to a shredder. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as it was designed to, protecting the powerful from the powerless. Their next stop was the high school. The principal, a man named Henderson with a practiced smile and empty eyes, listened to their story with feigned concern. "This is very serious," he said, steepling his fingers on his polished desk. "However, without clear evidence, Chad is one of our star athletes. He has a bright future." "There were witnesses," Creed stated. "They filmed it." Principal Henderson's smile tightened. "Ah, yes. The boys have already been spoken to. They claim the dog attacked first and Chad was simply defending himself. It's a classic he said, she said situation. And frankly, Mr. Sterling is a major benefactor of our school. His donations built the new gymnasium." The message was clear. The truth was for sale, and they couldn't afford the asking price. They walked out of the school into the cold sunlight. Sarah's shoulders were slumped in defeat. "I told you," she said, her voice small. "It's no use." Creed stopped and looked at her. "They want you to feel helpless. They want you to quit. That's how they win." He shook his head slowly. "We don't quit." The harassment started that afternoon. It began online. A series of anonymous posts appeared on a local social media page, accusing Sarah of being a liar, of provoking the incident, of trying to extort money from the Sterling family. Photos of her, taken without her knowledge, were posted with cruel captions. Her phone buzzed with notifications, each one a small digital stone thrown at her. That night, a brick came through her living room window. Wrapped around it was a note, printed in block letters: "Leave it alone." Creed was there within minutes. He found Sarah and her mother huddled in the kitchen, sweeping up the glass. He methodically boarded up the window, his movements efficient, his face unreadable. He saw the black sedan parked at the end of the street. It had been there for hours. He knew it wasn't police, it was surveillance, intimidation. A few days later, Chad Sterling cornered Sarah by her locker at school. His friends stood a few feet away, forming a casual, intimidating wall. "I heard you went to the cops," he hissed, his face close to hers. "I heard you went to Henderson. You need to learn when to stop." He shoved her hard against the metal lockers. Her head hit the door with a loud clang. Books spilled from her arms, scattering across the hallway floor. Students walked by. Some glanced over, then quickly looked away. No one stopped. No one helped. Chad leaned in closer, his voice a venomous whisper. "This is your last warning. My father can make your life a living hell, or he can make you disappear. Drop it." He smirked, then turned and walked away. His friends falling into step behind him, like hyenas following a lion. Sarah slid down the lockers to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest, surrounded by the silent judgment of the hallway. That evening, Creed sat in his motel room, cleaning a weapon he hadn't touched in years. The motions were automatic, muscle memory from a former life. He wasn't cleaning it for use. He was cleaning it to think. He had tried the system. He had played by the rules. The system was corrupt. The rules were rigged. He understood. He had hoped for a war of attrition, a battle of wills. But they had escalated. They had put their hands on her again. They had broken the new rules. His rules. He finished reassembling the firearm, the final click of the slide echoing in the quiet room. He put it away. It was time to make a phone call. He dialed a number he knew by heart. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Yeah." "Reaper," Creed said. "It's John." There was a pause on the other end. Then the voice warmed instantly. "Creed, brother, I thought you dropped off the face of the earth. You okay?" "I need a favor," Creed said. cutting straight to the point. There was no hesitation. Name it? I'm in a small town, Northwood. I'm dealing with a local tyrant. Man thinks his money makes him a king. His son is a problem. The system here is bought and paid for. So we're unbuying it, Reaper said. It wasn't a question. I need eyes. I need ears. I need a ghost in their machine, Creed said. Ghost is 2 hours out from you now, heading to a job. I'll divert him. Doc is with me. We can be there by 0600 tomorrow. What's the mission? Dismantle an empire, Creed said. We're burning it all down. Reaper chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. Now you're talking? Send me the file. We're coming in hot. Creed hung up. Phase 1 was complete. He had his team. Now he needed to build his local assets. His first stop was the office of the Northwood Chronicle, a small, struggling local newspaper. He asked for Alice Vance. He'd found her name online, attached to a series of articles from a few years back that had hinted at Richard Sterling's corrupt business practices. The series had been shut down abruptly. Vance was in her 40s, with tired eyes that held a spark of defiant fire. Her office was a chaotic mess of paper stacks and half-empty coffee cups. John Creed, he said, extending a hand. She looked him up and down. I don't talk to PIs hired by Richard Sterling. I'm not working for him, Creed said. I'm working against him. I'm helping Sarah Miller. Alice Vance's posture changed. She had heard the whispers at the school, the talk about the incident. She leaned forward, the fire in her eyes growing brighter. Tell me everything, she said. Creed did. He laid out the assault, the police inaction, the school's complicity. When he was done, she pushed a thick, dusty file across the desk toward him. It was labeled Sterling. I've been working on him for years, she said. Every time I get close, a source dries up, a witness recants. My editor kills the story. He owns the paper's biggest advertisers. But I never stopped digging. The file was a treasure trove. It held financial records, affidavits from former employees, stories of intimidation and bribery going back a decade. It was a roadmap of Richard Sterling's corruption. There are others, Vance said, her voice low. Other victims. Families he's ruined, people he's silenced. They're too scared to talk. They won't be, Creed said. Not for long. Vance gave him another name. Marcus Thorne, a lawyer. Thorne's office was above a hardware store, small and unassuming. The man himself was the opposite. He was a mountain, a former Marine JAG officer with a booming voice and a handshake that could crush walnuts. He listened to Creed's story without interruption, his expression grim. Sterling, he rumbled when Creed was finished. I've tangled with his corporate lawyers before. Slimiest snakes this side of the Mississippi. They bury you in paperwork and motions until you run out of money and hope. We're not running out of either, Creed said. Thorne grinned, a fierce, predatory expression. Good. I hate bullies. I'll take the case. Pro bono. It's about time someone knocked that tin pot dictator off his throne. With Vance's research and Thorne's legal guidance, they began the slow, patient work of building a real case. They started visiting the other families mentioned in her files. The first door was slammed in their faces. The second family threatened to call the police. But at the third house, a small, neat bungalow on the poor side of town, an elderly woman named Martha opened the door. Her son had been a foreman at Sterling's mill. He had reported safety violations. 2 days later, he was fired. A week after that, he was in a car accident, a hit and run. The case was never solved. Martha listened, her eyes filled with a grief that had never faded. He's too powerful, she whispered, her hands trembling. He is, Creed agreed. But we are not alone, and we are not afraid. Your son was a brave man. His story deserves to be heard." He spoke to her with a quiet respect, a soldier's understanding of loss and duty. He did not pressure her. He simply offered her a chance to find the justice her son had been denied. She looked from Creed to Vance, and for the first time in years, she saw a glimmer of hope. She invited them inside. Her story, once told, became the first crack in the dam of fear that Sterling had built around the town. With her testimony, another family came forward. And then another. A chorus of hushed voices began to grow, speaking of bribes, threats, and crimes that had been buried for years. Meanwhile, Reaper and his team had arrived. They operated from the shadows. Ghost, their tech wizard, sat in an unmarked van blocks away, peeling back the layers of Sterling's digital life. He found encrypted accounts, hidden servers, and a network of communications that spoke of widespread corruption. Reaper and Doc provided silent overwatch, tracking the movements of Chad Sterling and his father's security team. They were ghosts, ensuring Sarah and her mother were never truly alone, never vulnerable. The pressure was building. Richard Sterling felt it. The whispers were getting louder. The lawyer, Thorne, was filing motions that couldn't be easily dismissed. The journalist, Vance, was asking questions that made people nervous. He knew this all led back to the quiet man in the flannel jacket. His response was predictable. He escalated. Clears throat. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. Sarah was walking home from the library. The sun had set, and the streetlights cast long, distorted shadows on the snow. She had Max with her. His ribs were still healing, but he refused to leave her side, a furry, limping guardian. A car screeched to a halt beside her. Chad Sterling got out. He wasn't smiling. His face was twisted into a mask of pure rage. His father had screamed at him for hours, blaming him for bringing this storm down upon their family. "I warned you," he snarled, advancing on her. "I told you to stop." Sarah stood her ground. Max moved in front of her, growling, a low, pained rumble in his chest. "Get out of my way, Chad." Her voice shook, but it held a new strength, forged in the support of Creed and the others. Her defiance was gasoline on his fire. He lunged, not at her, but at the dog. He grabbed Max by the collar and flung him against a chain-link fence. Max yelped, his injured side taking the brunt of the impact. Something inside Sarah snapped. She flew at Chad, her fists flailing, landing blows on his chest and arms. It was a desperate, frantic attack, fueled by terror and love. For a moment, he was stunned. Then his rage took over completely. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her head back. He hit her. An open-handed slap that sent her stumbling, then a closed fist. She fell to the ground, the world spinning. But even as she fell, she fought back. She clawed at his face, her fingernails digging deep into his cheek, drawing blood. She was getting evidence. DNA. A lesson Creed had quietly taught her. Always fight back, always leave a mark. He kicked her, once, twice. The world went dark. From a rooftop half a block away, Reaper watched through a thermal scope. "Contact, contact," he whispered into his comms. "He's on her. I repeat, he is on the girl." Creed was 2 blocks away, in his truck, listening. He heard the cold fury in Reaper's voice. "Do not engage," Creed ordered, his own voice dangerously calm. "Get the footage. I'm moving in." He threw the truck into gear, the tires spinning on the icy road. By the time he arrived, Chad was gone. Sarah was a small, still heap on the sidewalk. Max was crawling toward her, whining, trying to lick her face, to wake her up. Creed knelt beside her. He saw the blood, the swelling, the unnatural angle of her arm. His training took over. He checked her pulse, her breathing. She was alive, unconscious. He gently gathered her into his arms, his face a granite mask of controlled fury. Later, in the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital emergency room, Creed stood over Sarah's bed. She had a broken arm, a concussion, and 3 cracked ribs. Her face was a landscape of purple and blue bruises. Her mother wept silently in a chair in the corner. Dr. Evans, the vet, had come as soon as she heard, her face etched with grief and rage. Creed looked at the sleeping girl, at the innocent life that had been so brutally assaulted. He had tried to play by their rules. He had tried to use their system. He had tried to contain the violence. He had failed to protect her. A cold, quiet clarity settled over him. The part of him that he had buried after the war, the part that was ruthlessly efficient, the part that made final decisions, came roaring back to life. The rules were gone. Restraint was a luxury they could no longer afford. He pulled out his phone and called Reaper. "Report. We have clear video of the entire assault," Reaper said, his voice tight. "High definition. And Ghost just hit the jackpot. He's in, all of it. Sterling's private servers, offshore accounts, payrolls for dirty cops, blackmail files, evidence of the hit and run on the foreman. He has it all." Creed stared at Sarah's bruised face. "The gloves are off," he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet carrying the force of a tectonic shift. This is no longer about justice. This is about eradication. "What's the play, John?" Reaper asked. "We burn it all to the ground," Creed said, "and we do it in public." The plan was executed with military precision. Phase 1 was the leak. Alice Vance, working with a national news syndicate she trusted, prepared a story. Ghost packaged the most damning evidence. The financial records proving bribery of the police chief and Principal Henderson, the files on the hit and run, and a dozen other crimes, into an encrypted file. He sent it to Vance's contact. The story was set to run in 24 hours. Phase 2 was the public forum. Richard Sterling was scheduled to accept the Man of the Year award at the annual Founders' Day Town Hall meeting. It was a vanity award he had essentially bought for himself. It was the perfect stage. Creed found Detective Miller, the one honest cop he had identified early on. He met him in a quiet alleyway. "I have undeniable evidence of corruption involving your chief and multiple officers," Creed said, handing him a thumb drive. "I also have video evidence of Chad Sterling's assault on Sarah Miller. Tonight, at the town hall, it's all going to come out. I need you to be ready." Miller looked at the drive, then at Creed. He had been waiting for a moment like this for years. "I'll need backup I can trust. State boys, not local." "They'll have probable cause in about an hour," Creed said. "Be ready to make the arrests when the show is over." Miller nodded. "It will be a pleasure." The town hall was packed. The air was thick with false praise and self-congratulation. Richard Sterling stood at the podium, basking in the applause, a portrait of civic virtue. He spoke of community, of family values, of the bright future of Northwood. In the back of the room, Creed stood with Reaper and Doc, invisible in the shadows. Marcus Thorne sat in the front row. Alice Vance stood up during the question and answer session. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Alice Vance, Northwood Chronicle. You speak of family values. I'd like to ask about your son's values." Sterling's smile became a thin, hard line. "My son is a good boy. This is not the time or place for slander." "Isn't it?" Vance asked. "Because I have a video I think the whole town should see." On cue, The large screen behind Sterling, which had been displaying a slideshow of his charitable donations, flickered. It was replaced by the crystal-clear footage from Reaper's scope. The crowd gasped. They saw Chad Sterling, their town's golden boy, viciously attacking Sarah Miller. They saw him beat her until she was unconscious on the frozen ground. The audio was pristine. They heard his threats, her cries, the sickening thud of his fists. Richard Sterling's face went white. He spun around, staring in horror at the screen. But it didn't stop there. The video of the assault was replaced by scanned documents. Bank transfers from Sterling's Shell Corporation to the police chief's private account. Emails between Sterling and Principal Henderson discussing Sarah's disciplinary problem. The suppressed accident report from the hit and run. It was an avalanche of truth, burying him live, in front of the whole town. The room erupted into chaos. Then, a single figure walked slowly toward the microphone in the center aisle. It was Sarah. Her arm was in a sling, a bruise still visible on her cheek. Max walked beside her, limping slightly, his head held high. She had refused to stay home. This was her fight, too. She reached the microphone. The room fell silent. All eyes were on her. She looked directly at Richard Sterling, whose face had crumbled into a mask of disbelief and fury. "My name is Sarah Miller," she said, her voice trembling but unbroken. "You took my father from me. He died for his country. You tried to take everything else. You tried to silence me. You tried to break me." She took a deep breath. "I am not broken," she declared, her voice ringing through the hall, "and I am not afraid of you anymore." As she finished speaking, the main doors of the town hall burst open. Detective Miller stood there, flanked by a dozen grim-faced state troopers in tactical gear. "Richard Sterling," Miller's voice boomed, cutting through the stunned silence. "You are under arrest for bribery, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." Two troopers moved toward the stage. Sterling looked wildly around, searching for an escape, for an ally. He found only the cold, condemning eyes of his community. "Chad Sterling," Miller continued, pointing toward the side door where Chad was trying to slip away. "You are under arrest for felony assault." Other troopers moved swiftly through the crowd, arresting the police chief, Principal Henderson, and two of Sterling's corporate lieutenants. It was clean. It was public. It was absolute. In the back of the room, Creed watched it all unfold, his expression unchanging. He had made a promise. Promise kept. The trials were swift. The evidence was overwhelming. The dam of silence had broken, and a flood of testimony washed away the Sterling empire. Richard Sterling received a sentence of 25 years to life. His son, tried as an adult, got 15. The corrupt officials received their own lengthy prison terms. Justice, for once, was not for sale. A few weeks after the verdicts, a boy knocked on the door of the small house Creed had rented for Sarah and her mother. It was one of the teenagers who had filmed the first assault on his phone. He stood on the porch, his head bowed, unable to meet Creed's eyes. "I came to apologize," he mumbled. "To Sarah. What we did, just watching. It was wrong. I'm sorry." Creed looked at the boy, at his genuine shame and remorse. He simply nodded and let him speak to Sarah. It was a small moment, but it was a sign that the town itself was beginning to heal. Creed had planned to leave after it was all over, to disappear back into the ghost life he'd been living. But watching Sarah and her mother begin to rebuild their lives, watching the town take its first tentative steps out from under the Sterling shadow, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of purpose, a sense of peace. He sold his truck. He used the last of his savings and his combat disability back pay to buy a small plot of land just outside of town. He started a nonprofit, the Fallen Warrior Project. He partnered with local animal shelters, taking in rescue dogs that no one else wanted. He began training them to be service animals for veterans suffering from trauma. He was giving broken soldiers and broken dogs a new mission. Together, he found his new purpose not in a war zone overseas, but in the quiet patience of healing. He was still a protector, but now he was also a builder. The story ends on a warm summer evening, a year later. Creed sat on the front porch of his small farmhouse. The air was filled with the sound of crickets and the gentle barking of dogs in the kennels out back. Sarah sat beside him, reading a textbook. She was at the top of her class now, her confidence restored, her future bright. She was applying to colleges, thinking about becoming a lawyer like Marcus Thorne. Max lay at their feet, his blind eyes closed, his breathing deep and even. His fur was now streaked with a little more gray around the muzzle. But he was content. He was home. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The storm had passed. The war was over. They had faced the darkness and had chosen to build a life in the light that followed. There is a strength that is not loud, a courage that does not boast. It is the quiet resolve of a good man who will not stand by while the innocent suffer. It is the fierce heart of a young woman who finds her voice in the face of evil. It is the unwavering loyalty of an animal who teaches us the meaning of unconditional love. They were 3 survivors, a soldier, a daughter, and a dog, who had found in each other not just a refuge, but a family. And in the quiet peace of that evening, they knew they had finally, truly come home.